The earth lies silent. An ancient world, once deafened by the thunder of dinosaurs, now draped in a darkness heavy with ash. Forests smolder, oceans boil at their edges, their surfaces veiled in a choking haze. The sky itself is wounded, a canopy torn apart by fire. What had reigned supreme for over 160 million years, giants of unimaginable power, has been erased in a single cosmic instant. And yet, the story does not end here. From the ruins, life stirs. It is not graceful, at first frail creatures, small and uncertain, emerging from burrows and shadows. But silence, too, can give birth to titans. In time, the earth will be repopulated by new monsters, different from the reptiles that came before mammals, that will stretch toward unimaginable size, birds that will inherit the role of apex predator, beasts armored like tanks, and predators with fangs like ivory swords. This was the Cenozoic, a forgotten age of monsters, an age not carved into the cultural memory as dinosaurs were, yet just as filled with leviathans that shaped the world. The largest mammals to ever walk the earth rose in its warmth. Birds taller than men stalked open plains with predatory eyes, and entire ecosystems thrived in climates stranger and more extreme than we know today. But if such an age existed, why do we not remember it? Why has the image of these beasts been eclipsed by the shadows of dinosaurs? Perhaps because their bones do not whisper of alien reptilian shapes, but of distorted mirrors, creatures that are both monstrous and familiar. Perhaps because some of them lived alongside our distant ancestors, their memory dissolving into myth and silence. The mystery remains. The age of Cenozoic monsters, told, overlooked, almost forgotten. A chapter of Earth's story waiting to be rediscovered. The bones were the first to speak. They rose from riverbeds and deserts, from caverns and cliffs, emerging not as tidy skeletons, but as fragments, shards of a forgotten language carved into stone. To those who stumbled upon them in the early centuries of discovery, they were both familiar and alien, too vast to belong to any living creature, yet too close to the shapes of animals men already knew. They hinted at a world where the ordinary was magnified into monstrosity. In the late 18th century, South American explorers unearthed bones so immense that their purpose seemed impossible. Vast femurs thicker than a man's chest, skulls heavy as boulders, great claws and armored shells of creatures no naturalist had ever described. To farmers and priests, they were relics of biblical floods, remnants of beasts drowned in divine catastrophe. To philosophers of nature, they were puzzles, echoes of a hidden world that defied the order of the living. It was Georges Cuvier in Paris who first dared to see them for what they were. The father of paleontology looked upon these fragments and recognized the truth that many resisted. Extinction was real. The whole species had lived and vanished, never to return. He named the colossal ground sloth Megatherium, an animal that had once risen like a living wall, taller than any elephant, dragging itself with claws that could uproot trees. He identified the armored Glyptodon, a mammal encased in a shell like a living fortress, rolling across prehistoric plains like a moving citadel. These were not curiosities. They were the shattered remnants of an age of monsters. The revelation was staggering. If the earth could lose its creatures so completely, then life itself was not fixed, not eternal, but fragile, subject to forces vast and violent. Humanity, for the first time, was forced to imagine time not as a few thousand years, but as a vast ocean, its surface littered with the wreckage of vanished worlds. In the beginning, these bones did not fit easily into science or faith. Some saw them as survivors of Noah's flood, monsters drowned when the waters receded. Others claimed they were still alive, hidden in remote jungles or deserts. Rumors spread of giant beasts lurking in unexplored lands, their bones merely evidence of the living shadows yet to be found. But as excavations multiplied, the story grew clearer. The bones belonged not to hidden beasts, but to entire lost epochs. The discoveries did not arrive all at once. They came as scattered hints. The fossilized shell of a Glyptodon in Argentina, so massive that settlers mistook it for the ruins of a small stone hut. The bones of Megatherium hauled back to Madrid, where they dwarfed the naturalists who gathered to examine them. In North America, skulls of monstrous bison and horned mammals emerged from the earth, too strange to classify, their forms twisting between the known and the unknown. And in the fossil beds of South America, paleontologists uncovered the remains of Ferruciorestes, giant flightless birds with hooked beaks like axes, towering predators that filled the role left vacant by the dinosaurs. Each new find widened the gulf between imagination and reality. Humanity had long told myths of dragons, giants, and monsters. Now, the bones revealed that truth was stranger than fable. The earth itself had been a forge of beasts, crafting forms both wondrous and terrifying, only to erase them in silence. But what unsettled scientists most was not simply the scale of these creatures. It was the realization that the world was layered with forgotten ages, each with its own dominion of life. Dinosaurs had once reigned, yes, but they were not the final empire before humans. Between their fall and our rise stretched a vast theater of giants, an entire age of mammals and birds, whose legacy was written not in legend but in stone. The 19th century became a time of excavation and wonder. Fossils were hauled into the grand halls of Europe, displayed under vaulted ceilings and flickering gaslights. Crowds gathered to see the bones of monsters that once walked the earth. Scholars sketched reconstructions. The Megatherium, hunched like a mountain of flesh, reaching with claws to strip trees bare. The Glyptodon, a lumbering tank of the ancient plains. The terror bird, striding across open ground with predatory precision. These images entered the collective imagination, half science, half spectacle, and wholly unsettling. Yet beneath the awe lingered a quiet dread. Extinction was not a myth. It was a fact etched into every fossil, every broken skeleton pulled from the earth. Species lived, and species died. None was safe, not even the titans. For humanity, this was a revelation both humbling and terrifying. It meant that the world had always been transient, a theater of impermanence. It meant that our own existence was not inevitable but fragile, perched upon the ruins of countless forgotten ages. If monsters as vast as Megatherium could vanish, then what guarantee had humankind have? The debates raged across Europe's salons and academies. Was extinction the result of cataclysms, violent floods, earthquakes, celestial strikes? Or was it a slow, grinding process, creatures failing as the world changed beneath them? Some clung to biblical interpretations, unwilling to imagine a world older than Scripture. Others embraced the radical vision of deep time, a planet billions of years old, reshaping itself again and again, erasing and reinventing its inhabitants in cycles of destruction and renewal. By the dawn of the 19th century, a new picture began to emerge. The bones of the Cenozoic were not relics of chaos, but chapters of a hidden chronicle. They told of ages after the dinosaurs, when mammals rose to fill empty niches, when birds became predators, when climates shifted and sculpted life into forms unimaginable. Each fossil was a sentence in a book humanity had only just learned to read. And yet, even as this forgotten library of life opened before them, most of its stories remained unsaid. Dinosaurs seized the imagination, their monstrous shapes more alien, more distinct from anything alive. The Cenozoic beasts, though colossal, were too close, too familiar. They looked like shadows of animals still among US sloths, armadillos, cats, elephants. They did not seem like creatures of another world, but distorted reflections of our own. And perhaps that was more frightening. To gaze at a megatherium was to see a sloth transformed into a titan. To face a Glyptodon was to see an armadillo armored into a fortress. To meet a terror bird was to look into the eyes of a predator not so different from those that might stalk us still. Humanity stood then at the edge of a vast library, each fossil a forgotten volume, each excavation a new revelation. The bones whispered of worlds lost, of monsters erased, of ages between dinosaurs and humans that stretched like unlit corridors into the past. And though the doors had been opened, few dared to wander too deep, for within those halls lay a truth too vast, too unsettling. The earth is older, stranger, and more haunted by forgotten titans than we can ever fully remember. The first encounters with these remains were not the work of professional scientists, but of farmers, miners, and explorers who uncovered them by chance. In the pampas of Argentina, peasants unearthed shells so vast and domed that they believed them to be the ruins of ancient stone huts. It was only when scholars inspected them that the truth became clear. These were not the works of men, but the shells of Glyptodon, colossal armored mammals that once roamed South America. Their shells alone were so immense that a grown man could crouch beneath them like a soldier beneath a shield. They spoke of a world where the ordinary had been magnified into the extraordinary, where the small and fragile armadillo had once had a cousin encased in armor thick as stone. To imagine such a beast alive, lumbering across open plains, was to glimpse a world both alien and familiar. When the bones of Megatherium were first shipped to Europe, they caused a sensation. This was no reptile like the fossils already known, no dragon-like form from deep antiquity. It was a mammal, one of our kind, and yet its scale was unimaginable. Taller than an elephant, with claws longer than a man's hand, the giant ground sloth seemed like a distortion of nature, a gentle animal twisted into monstrous size. Reconstructions of the creature depicted it as a shaggy colossus, towering above trees to feed, dragging itself with claws that could uproot trunks. The thought that such a creature had once wandered South America filled naturalists with awe, but also dread. If mammals could grow into monsters, then the line between the present and the past was thinner than anyone had realized. These revelations struck at the heart of human belief. Until then, many had assumed that all creatures ever created by nature or by God still existed somewhere, hidden in distant lands. Extinction was unthinkable, for to vanish completely was to contradict the eternal order of creation. Cuvier's studies of these fossils shattered that illusion. He demonstrated that these animals were not merely unknown survivors, nor the beasts of local folklore, but members of whole lineages erased from existence. With this came the dawning truth. Extinction was not an exception, but a rule. Life on Earth was a story written in errors, each ending with loss. The idea was almost unbearable. If monsters like Megatherium and Glyptodon could vanish, what of the mighty mammoths whose tusks still surfaced in the frozen soils of Siberia? What of the lions and bears that roamed Europe's caves in ancient times? And if they, too, could disappear, then what of humanity itself? The fossil spoke not only of forgotten monsters, but of the impermanence of life. To gaze upon them was to confront mortality, not just of individuals, but of entire species. Debates erupted in universities and churches. Some insisted these remains were evidence of Noah's flood, washed into strange places and preserved by divine waters. Others argued that the creatures still lived, hidden in unexplored jungles or deserts, waiting to be rediscovered. But with each new excavation, the case for deep time grew stronger. The bones did not speak of a single flood or catastrophe, but of ages upon ages, layers of history built atop one another like the strata of stone in which they were buried. Each layer carried the weight of lives once lived, creatures that had ruled their moment, only to be swept away. The public, too, was captivated. Museums began to display these relics of forgotten ages, their bones assembled into towering reconstructions that dwarfed the visitors who gazed upward in awe. For the first time, ordinary men and women could stand beneath the skeletons of monsters that had once been real. They could imagine a world where flightless birds, taller than men and armed with axe-like beaks, stalked the plains as apex predators. They could walk past the bones of armored giants, lumbering beasts that seemed closer to machines than animals. They could peer into the empty sockets of skulls that belonged to predators more terrible than any lion or wolf. These exhibitions blurred the line between science and spectacle, between education and theatre. Yet beneath the grandeur, a haunting question lingered. Why had these creatures been forgotten? Why had the memory of them not endured in human stories as the dinosaurs had? Perhaps it was because dinosaurs seemed wholly alien, their bones unlike anything in the living world, sparking imagination with shapes that defied comparison. The Cenozoic monsters, by contrast, felt like shadows of the present. They were sloths, armadillos, cats, and elephants, stretched and twisted into monstrous form. They were too close, too human in their familiarity, and perhaps that closeness made their loss even more disturbing. To remember them would be to remember that even creatures like those we know today, creatures like ourselves, are not immune to erasure. In this sense, the discovery of the Cenozoic was more than the uncovering of bones. It was the uncovering of a truth about impermanence, about the fragility of life and the shifting stage of Earth's history. The fossils were not relics of fantasy. They were reminders that the world had been many worlds before, each with its own monsters, each with its own dominion, and each destined to vanish. Humanity, standing at the threshold of this knowledge, realized that the earth was less a stable home than a vast, forgotten library, its shelves filled with volumes few had ever read, its halls echoing with the silence of ages past. The first wave of discovery brought bones into the light. The second wave brought disbelief. Two scholars of the early 19th century, the notion that mammals, creatures so close to humanity, could once have been giants seemed almost absurd. Mammals were thought to be creatures of moderation, beings of balance and intelligence, not colossal forms of brute scale. Dinosaurs, with their alien reptilian bodies, belonged easily to a distant and mythic past, but mammals, with their familiar faces and forms, were thought of as companions in the present order of life. To imagine them as titans was to unsettle the very categories by which nature had been organized. Yet the evidence would not be silenced. The skulls of monstrous sloths, the shells of armored behemoths, the talons of flightless birds all told a story that contradicted human intuition. The chain of being, that grand ladder of creation which placed life in a neat hierarchy, could not account for these giants. Where did they belong? Were they errors, aberrations, experiments by nature abandoned in failure? Or were they chapters in an unfolding drama, steps along a path that led inexorably to the present? Each fossil unearthed forced a reckoning, pressing scholars to see life not as a fixed order, but as a shifting procession of forms across time. Among those who felt the weight of this revelation was a young naturalist named Charles Darwin. In 1832, during his voyage on the HMS Beagle, he walked the windswept cliffs of South America and encountered bones that astonished him. There, embedded in the stone, were the remains of Megatherium and Glyptodon. To stand before them was to face monsters not from the age of reptiles, but from the age of mammals. Darwin realized that these fossils were not isolated curiosities. They belonged to the same lands that were still inhabited by smaller, living relatives, sloths, armadillos. The resemblance was undeniable, and yet the scale was vastly different. Why had their ancestors been giants, while their descendants were diminished? What force governed such transformations? Darwin carried these questions with him, letting them settle into the foundations of his thought. The fossil giants of the Cenozoic were among the seeds of his revolutionary idea that species were not immutable, but changed with time, adapting or vanishing as the world itself shifted. The monsters of the past were not divine errors or survivors of catastrophe, but part of an unbroken lineage of change. They were evidence that the Earth's history was not singular, but layered, each age producing its own dominion of life. The scientific world wrestled with these implications. For centuries, scholars had believed that life existed in a static order, a perfect arrangement set at creation. But fossils of monstrous mammals challenged this vision. They revealed a world in flux, a world that created and destroyed forms with a rhythm as deep as geological time itself. The public, meanwhile, was caught between wonder and unease. Newspapers printed engravings of giant sloths and armored beasts, their illustrations straddling the line between science and spectacle. Traveling exhibitions displayed fossil casts alongside living animals, inviting audiences to compare the creatures of the present with their monstrous ancestors. Museums became cathedrals of lost ages, their vaulted halls filled with the bones of giants who no longer walked the earth. Yet fascination was laced with dread. These fossils carried a message that could not be ignored. Extinction was inevitable. No matter how vast, no matter how powerful, no species was immune to the forces of time and change. The bones were monuments, not of triumph, but of loss. They whispered that the reign of monsters always ends, and that even the rulers of the present would one day join the ruins of the past. For humanity, this was more than a scientific realization. It was a philosophical wound. The idea that life had many ages of monsters, and that each had ended in silence, forced people to confront their own impermanence. Dinosaurs had been erased. Cenozoic titans had vanished. What then of the future? Were humans themselves but another chapter in the endless chronicle of creation and destruction? Scientists debated fiercely, seeking to explain why these giants had risen and why they had fallen. Some argued that climate was the great sculptor, that warmth and abundance had allowed mammals to swell to immense sizes, while cooling ages pruned them back. Others saw extinction as the hand of sudden catastrophe, repeating again and again across deep time. Still others clung to older beliefs, insisting that the fossils were remains of biblical floods, or survivors waiting to be discovered in remote corners of the world. But the longer the debates continued, the clearer it became. The Earth's history was not one of continuity, but of transformation. Life was not preserved in amber. It was a river, endlessly reshaping itself in the quiet halls of natural history. Where fossils were catalogued and arranged, a new perspective began to take hold. The monsters of the Cenozoic were not errors, nor were they curiosities. They were milestones along the road of evolution. They revealed that the Earth had not simply replaced one age of giants with another, but that it had used extinction as a chisel, carving new forms from the ruins of the old. The fall of the dinosaurs had not left the Earth empty. It had cleared the stage for mammals and birds to ascend, to stretch into monstrous forms of their own, before giving way again to change. The first scientific reactions to these fossils were thus a mixture of awe and anxiety, a recognition that the world was older, stranger, and more dynamic than anyone had imagined. The discovery of giant mammals shattered the illusion of permanence and forced humanity to see itself as part of a grander story, one in which even the familiar could become monstrous, and even the monstrous could vanish into silence. The bones, laid bare in stone and soil, told a truth that was both beautiful and unsettling, that the world had been filled, again and again, with creatures we had forgotten, and that forgetting was part of the very rhythm of life itself. Under the vaulted ceilings of Europe's early museums, the presence of these colossal skeletons carried with it a kind of sacred hush. Visitors stood beneath the towering frames of Megatherium, gazing upward as though at an ancient cathedral of bone. Here was proof of a world that had thrived long before memory, long before scripture, long before even the idea of human history. Yet with every skull and ribcage assembled, the tension grew sharper. These fossils were not curiosities to be tucked away in cabinets. They were confrontations with time itself. The Cenozoic Titans declared that nature was not static, that creation did not end on the sixth day, and that extinction was not an anomaly, but a law written into the earth. For many, this realization was deeply unsettling. If nature could abandon such marvels, if it could sweep away a beast that once weighed for tons and could claw down trees, then what protection did humanity truly have? The scholars of the age struggled to place these giants into a narrative. Some clung to familiar myths, declaring them remnants of a biblical deluge, drowned in the waters of Noah's flood. Others, like Georges Cuvier, insisted with bold certainty that extinction was real, that entire lineages had perished in vast upheavals of the earth. His ideas carried the weight of scandal, for they shattered the belief in an unbroken continuity of life. To admit that nature could extinguish its own creations was to admit that humanity, too, might not be permanent. It was a truth so vast that even the most rational minds resisted it, and yet the fossils refused to bend to comfort. They told their story in the silence of stone, and their silence was more persuasive than any sermon. Across the Atlantic, the bones found in South America added new layers of mystery. Darwin, walking among them, filled his notebooks with sketches and reflections. The resemblance between giant fossils and their smaller living relatives pressed him toward an unsettling conclusion, that species were not immutable, but malleable, sculpted by environment and time. It was a quiet revelation, one that did not explode in his writings at once, but simmered, waiting for its place in a larger theory. He did not yet speak of natural selection, but the seeds had been planted by the hulking bones of a vanished world. When he returned to England, he brought not only specimens, but also questions that would haunt him for decades. Meanwhile, the public's fascination transformed the age of discovery into a spectacle. Engravings of armored Glyptodons appeared in newspapers, their shells drawn like natural fortresses. Models of giant sloths were carted through exhibitions, their immensity exaggerated for dramatic effect. Traveling shows promised audiences a glimpse of prehistoric monsters, their advertising fusing science with performance. The boundary between sober observation and theatrical wonder blurred, but the effect was profound. Ordinary people began to imagine a past not just of Edenic gardens, but of beasts that defied imagination. The earth itself became a stage, its deep past a succession of strange empires rising and falling, each leaving bones behind as their only testimony. And yet, threaded through all this excitement was a sobering reflection. These discoveries revealed a world of impermanence. Titans had walked the earth and had fallen into silence. The very creatures that seemed invincible in their size and strength were gone, reduced to fossils that crumbled under the touch. Humanity was forced to ask an unsettling question. If giants could perish, why not us? The fossil record became not just a chronicle of strange beasts, but a mirror in which human fragility was reflected. Museums did not only display bones, they displayed mortality on a planetary scale. The early decades of the 19th century unfolded like the turning of a hidden page in Earth's forgotten chronicle. From the fragmented bones of giants scattered across deserts and riverbeds, a new science began to take shape. Comparative anatomy rose as a guiding light, a method of seeing the unseen. By studying the bones of living animals and placing them side by side with the fossilized remains of creatures long vanished, scholars could weave connections across the abyss of time. A sloth's curved claws found their echo in the petrified talons of Megatherium. The armor of an armadillo became the living key to unlock the mystery of Glyptodon. For the first time, the living and the dead spoke to one another, and through their dialogue, a vast, continuous history of life began to emerge. The earth itself became a kind of grand library, its pages written not in ink but in stone. Each fossil, each bone fragment, was a letter in a language only beginning to be deciphered. Expeditions ventured into lands that seemed untouched by time. Patagonia, where the bones of colossal ground sloths and armored behemoths lay buried in the cliffs. The open expanses of North America, where mastodons and mammoths waited beneath prairie soil. The remote reaches of Asia, where the bones of the greatest land mammal to ever exist in Ricketthium would one day be unearthed. These journeys were not mere hunts for curiosities. They were pilgrimages into Earth's deep memory, quests to reconstruct entire worlds that had once breathed, walked, and fallen into silence. As the discoveries multiplied, the outlines of a new chronology began to take form. The epochs of the Cenozoic Palacine, Eocene, Oligocene, Oligocene appeared like markers on a map of time. Each represented not simply a division of years, but an unfolding drama of climates shifting, seas rising and retreating, forests spreading and then thinning into grasslands. It was a revelation that the earth was not static but alive in its own slow pulse, forever remaking itself. With every geological layer uncovered, the picture sharpened. First came the Paleocene, an age of recovery, where mammals crept upward in size to fill the silence left by dinosaurs. Then the Eocene, lush and hot, a greenhouse world where giant predators stalked beneath tropical canopies. And finally, the Oligocene, a time of transition, where cooling climates carved new opportunities for strange, powerful creatures to dominate. Among the most startling revelations was that the role of apex predator had not vanished with the last of the theropod dinosaurs. In South America, paleontologists unearthed the towering bones of flightless birds forschruchresraces, the so-called terror birds. Some stood 3 meters tall, armed not with teeth but with massive hooked beaks, sharpened by evolution into weapons of bone. They were swifter than any giant mammal of their day, hunting with relentless precision. For millions of years, it was not mammals but birds that ruled as the tyrants of the land, a truth that startled those who had once imagined that feathers belonged only to fragile creatures of the air. These predators were heirs to the raptors of the Mesozoic, a reminder that extinction is not a clean slate, but a reshuffling, a reimagining of power in new forms. And then came the giants of unimaginable scale. In the open plains of Asia, the bones of Indricotherium revealed a mammal so large it dwarfed elephants, standing over 5 meters at the shoulder, stretching more than 8 in length. It browsed treetops that no other animal could reach, its immense body a living monument to the Cenozoic's capacity for grandeur. This was not a survivor from the age of dinosaurs, but a wholly new creation, life's phoenix rising from the ashes of catastrophe, wearing new shapes yet embodying the same relentless push toward size, power, and dominance. The earth, it seemed, had lost none of its ability to conjure monsters. And yet, behind these revelations lay a deeper truth. The bones were not only fragments of lost creatures, they were evidence of resilience. The asteroid had annihilated, but the earth had answered with rebirth. Where fire had once scorched the land, forests bloomed again. Where the seas had boiled, new life swam in their depths. And on land, evolution carved new titans from fragile beginnings. The Cenozoic was not a pale afterthought to the Mesozoic. It was a renewal, a reassertion of nature's capacity to imagine anew. Like a phoenix, the earth had risen, and its rebirth was monstrous, magnificent, and fleeting. The deeper the excavations went, the more the earth revealed itself as a keeper of hidden epochs. Each discovery suggested not just isolated creatures, but whole ecosystems frozen in fragments. A jawbone hinted at predators. A scattering of teeth revealed grazing herds, while fossilized leaves whispered of climates long vanished. Scientists began to realize that they were not uncovering isolated monsters, but piecing together the outlines of entire worlds' self-contained stages upon which life had once performed dramas of survival and extinction. It was as though time itself had left behind a shattered mosaic, waiting for patient hands to restore its forgotten images. In Patagonia, the land seemed to yield relic after relic of astonishing scale. There, massive femurs rose from the cliffs like pillars from some lost temple, evidence of sloths that stood taller than a house. Skulls of armored Glyptodons, with shells broad enough to serve as shelters, emerged from eroded riverbanks. The more these bones were unearthed, the more South America revealed itself as a land of giants, an island continent where evolution had run along its own secret path. Entire lineages of mammals and birds had flourished in splendid isolation, evolving into forms that mirrored dinosaurs in both size and ferocity. Even as they remained fundamentally different, it was as if nature, given a second chance, had rewritten the script with new characters but the same sense of grandeur. In North America, discoveries of mastodons and mammoths added to this growing picture of Cenozoic majesty. These creatures were not confined to distant ages, for some had walked the earth in the presence of early humans, their ivory tusks etched into myths and their remains buried in glacial soils. Unlike the thunder lizards of the Mesozoic, these giants felt nearer, more tangible ghosts that lingered at the threshold of human memory. They served as a reminder that the age of monsters was not some distant abstraction, but a reality that bled into the dawn of humanity itself. The scientific impulse of the time sought not only to classify, but to arrange, to impose order upon this bewildering collection of relics. And so, the Cenozoic timeline was drawn like a cartographer's chart, dividing the past into epochs. The Paleocene, first breath after the cataclysm, populated by creatures small, cautious, and still tentative. The Eocene, lush and fevered, where mammals swelled into forms that defied expectation. The Oligocene, an age of change, where cooling climates sculpted new landscapes and invited new forms of power. To trace this timeline was to recognize that Earth was not a static backdrop, but a restless architect, remaking its kingdoms over and over again. It was also during these early investigations that the first imaginative reconstructions began to take shape. Artists and naturalists sought to breathe flesh back onto the skeletons, sketching the terror birds with wings reduced to useless stubs, but eyes like sharpened daggers, their hooked beaks ready to strike. They painted the Indricothers as mountain-sized browsers striding across endless plains, their silhouettes like living towers against the horizon. To the public, these illustrations were revelations. They offered the first glimpses of a world no human had ever seen, yet one that was written in the stone beneath their feet. But beyond the scientific astonishment, there lingered a deeper, more haunting reflection. These creatures spoke of resilience, yes, but also of they were evidence that life could return, reborn in monstrous splendor after catastrophe. Yet they also bore the silent testimony of fragility, for every bone was proof of an ending. To contemplate the Cenozoic monsters was to confront a paradox, that nature is both endlessly creative and mercilessly destructive, that every age of giants is already on the path towards silence. The earth, like a phoenix, had risen from fire, but every rebirth carried within it the seed of its own demise. At the dawn of the 20th century, the story of Earth's forgotten monsters deepened with a revelation that shattered the last illusions of permanence. Fossils were no longer mere curiosities. They became clocks. With the advent of radiometric dating, scientists gained the ability to measure the slow decay of isotopes, to hold in their hands the invisible ticking of atomic time. No longer could the age of the Earth be counted in thousands of years as once imagined. Instead, its history opened into millions, then hundreds of millions, an abyss of time stretching far beyond the scope of human imagination. What once seemed like a chain of brief epochs now unfolded as vast continents of time, oceans of years in which entire dynasties of creatures had risen, ruled, and perished. The Cenozoic, once considered a shadow after the age of dinosaurs, revealed itself as a stage that had lasted more than 60 million years, a span longer than the entire reign of the Mesozoic's greatest predators. With time came climate. Through the careful study of sediments, ice cores, and fossilized leaves, a picture emerged of a world that was not constant, but ever shifting. The early Cenozoic was revealed as a greenhouse Earth, a planet wrapped in warmth, where forests sprawled across high latitudes and crocodiles swam in the Arctic. Fossil wood and leaves found deep within Greenland and Siberia spoke of canopies that once filtered golden light onto ferns and broad-leaved trees, a paradise where reptiles and mammals alike thrived. It was a vision almost incomprehensible. The poles, now wastelands of ice, had once been jungles alive with color. Later, epochs told of cooling, of ice sheets creeping slowly down from the poles, of open grasslands replacing dense forests. Life responded with restless inventions, grew sharper, bodies larger, armor thicker. Every climate shift became a call to adapt, and those who could not fell into silence. Among the strangest revelations was the discovery of apex predators unlike any the world had seen before. In the fossil beds of Mongolia, a skull nearly a meter long told of Androsaurus, a beast with the jaws of a wolf stretched onto the scale of a bear, perhaps weighing 1,000 kilograms. Its presence suggested a predator of terrifying power. Stalking an ancient coastline, an echo of the Mesozoic's tyrants reborn in mammalian flesh. Though only fragments remain, the imagination fills the void, conjuring an image of a world where such titans once commanded fear. These predators stood as proof that the Cenozoic was not a quiet aftermath, but a theater of power struggles as fierce as anything the dinosaurs had known. The fossils revealed not only isolated giants, but the traces of evolutionary wars fought over millions of years. Armored Glyptodons developed shells thicker than bone itself, fortresses that predators could scarcely crack. In turn, predators evolved crushing jaws and immense strength, each side escalating in a slow, relentless arms race. Enormous herbivores stretched their necks higher, reaching into trees to escape competition, while predators adapted speed and cunning to hunt them. It was a cycle as old as life itself, defense giving rise to offense, predator shaping prey, prey reshaping predator. The battlefield was not a moment, but an epoch, drawn out over geological time with the patience of eternity. Seen through this lens, the Earth became not merely a planet, but a stage, one upon which the cast of life was forever changing. Each age brought new characters, new scripts, new struggles. Dinosaurs had been one act, the Cenozoic another, but the drama remained the same: survival, adaptation, dominance, and extinction. It was a story written not in words, but in bone, rehearsed across eons, performed in silence, and witnessed now only by those who listened to the language of stone. The monsters of the Cenozoic were not echoes of the past, but voices of life's endless experimenter, reminder that the earth has always been a restless playwright, never content with a single vision of grandeur, forever summoning new titans to walk its shifting stage, in places where the earth's memory has been preserved with uncanny precision. The Cenozoic reveals itself not as a haze of distant bones, but as a living world frozen in time. At Messal in Germany, a quarry-turned-fossil bed became a portal into the Eocene 50 million years ago. Here oil shale preserved entire creatures with delicate fidelity, bats with wings outstretched as though still in flight, fish with the contents of their last meal sealed within their bellies, and the faint outlines of fur and feathers imprinted into stone. Even the color of an insect's wing or the delicate skin of a reptile could be glimpsed, as if time itself had hesitated for a moment before allowing them to vanish. These fossils told not only of individuals, but of entire ecosystems captured in a single breath of geological time. They revealed that the monsters of the Cenozoic did not live in isolation, but within landscapes as rich and dynamic as any today lush forests, where giant mammals browsed and terror birds hunted in silence beneath the canopy. In North America, the fluorescent fossil beds offered another window into this forgotten age. Beneath volcanic ash, a lake bed preserved leaves, insects, and delicate flowers alongside the bones of mammals and birds. Here, one could see with startling clarity the very environment that nurtured Cenozoic monsters, the plants that fed the herbivores, the insects that pollinated the trees, the predators that moved silently through grass and shadow. Each fossil was a thread, and together they wove a tapestry of life that gave shape to an entire vanished world. To walk among these fossils was to glimpse the stage upon which titans once performed. A stage no less complex, no less vibrant than the one that hosts humanity today. As evidence mounted, the image of Earth's past grew ever stranger. The Arctic, once thought a realm of eternal ice, yielded fossils of broad-leaved trees, crocodiles, and turtles. These were not scattered accidents, but signs of a greenhouse world where warmth had reached the poles, flooding them with life. The idea that the Arctic could once have been a forest shocked the imagination, for it revealed how unstable the planet could be, how icily climates shifted from ice to jungle. For the monsters of the Cenozoic, these changes were both gift and curse. Warmth allowed them to flourish, to reach sizes never before seen among mammals, but the same climate that gave them grandeur also carried the seeds of their decline. For cooling and ice would one day bring their reign to an end. The discoveries suggested that the Cenozoic was not merely an interlude between the age of reptiles and the age of humanity, but a fully realized empire of life in its own right. Within its long epochs, power shifted from one form to another, as though the earth were testing possibilities, birds rising as predators, mammals expanding into giants, ecosystems flourishing in extremes of heat and cold. Each age seemed like an experiment, as if nature itself were probing the boundaries of what life could become. And always, the monsters stood as the most dramatic expressions of this experiment, creatures whose size, strength, or ferocity revealed life's restless ambition. The lesson was inescapable. The Cenozoic was not a quiet coda to the thunder of dinosaurs. It was a symphony of its own, vast and varied, echoing across millions of years. To see it only as aftermath was to miss its grandeur. It was an age of fire-forged renewal, of titans born not from reptilian blood but from mammalian flesh, of forests and plains filled with predators and prey locked in eternal contest. And like every act in Earth's long drama, it was destined to fade, leaving behind only whispers in stone and the silent invitation for those who come after to imagine it back into life. Time itself began to reveal the true scale of the Cenozoic world. Radiometric dating, using the decay of uranium to lead potassium to argon and other isotopic clocks, allowed scientists to peer into epochs long thought inaccessible. No longer was the Earth measured in mere thousands of years, a span trivial against the sweep of life. It stretched into tens of millions, a deep and unknowable ocean of time. Each fossil became a marker, a waypoint along a journey of unimaginable duration. The bones of Megatherium, Glyptodon, and the terror birds were no longer curiosities. They were witnesses, silent yet eloquent, testifying to a planet in constant transformation. The Cenozoic was revealed as a grand theatre, an age where mammals rose to heights of size and power rivaling the long-extinct dinosaurs, and where life experimented with form on a scale both terrifying and beautiful. Climate reconstructions painted the Earth in ever-shifting colors. The early Cenozoic was a greenhouse world, with heat trapped by a thick atmosphere, turning the poles into lush paradises of dense forests and expansive wetlands. Fossilized flora from Greenland and Siberia spoke of broad-leaved trees and ferns, while remains of crocodiles, turtles, and amphibians suggested a warmth that defied modern expectations. Life flourished in abundance, taking advantage of climates that invited gigantism. Yet, with time, the world cooled. Ice sheets expanded from the poles, transforming continents, carving valleys, and reshaping ecosystems. Open grasslands replaced dense forests, favoring speed, endurance, and adaptation over sheer size. Giants evolved, thrived, and eventually dwindled in response to these slow, relentless shifts. The Earth was both crucible and canvas, its climate shaping the destiny of monsters, dictating which would rise and which would fall into silence. The Arctic, now a frozen wasteland, yielded evidence of this ancient abundance. Forests once stretched across high latitudes, vibrant with life unimaginable in the icy present. Trees grew tall, providing sustenance for browsing mammals. Birds nested in canopies where now only snow and permafrost endure. The fossil record showed that the Cenozoic was not a uniform age, but a kaleidoscope of ecosystems, each shaped by local climate, terrain, and evolutionary pressures. Life had reclaimed the world after the asteroid, but it had done so with creativity and ambition, generating monsters unlike any before, perfectly adapted to their strange, shifting domains. Among the apex predators, few could rival the terror inspired by the wolf-headed titan of Asia's ancient coasts. Its skull alone suggested a creature capable of crushing bone, its immense size rivaling the largest terrestrial carnivores known to modern science. The discovery of this predator revealed a startling truth. Mammals, too, could evolve into monsters. They could dominate landscapes with tooth and claw, reclaiming roles once held by reptiles. Across the continents, evolutionary arms races unfolded. Armored prey, like Glyptodon, bore carapaces thick enough to withstand most attacks, while predators developed crushing jaws, speed, and intelligence to breach those defenses. Nature was in dialogue with itself, a conversation of offense and defense, predator and prey, played out over millennia. Viewed from this perspective, the Cenozoic became more than a chronological bridge between dinosaurs and humans. It was a laboratory, an endless experiment where life tested its boundaries of size, shape, and strength. Each epoch introduced new challenges, new monsters, and new strategies for survival. The Earth was a stage, vast and unyielding, upon which evolution choreographed dramas of survival and extinction, innovation and decay. In the bones of its vanished titans lay the poetry of persistence and impermanence, the reminder that life is at once fragile and unstoppable, and that even after catastrophe, it finds ways to rise, monstrous and magnificent, into the light once more, across continents and epoch. The monsters of the Cenozoic emerged as both witnesses and participants in the Earth's ongoing drama. In the open plains of Asia, a hornless giant standing over 5 meters at the shoulder, grazed atop trees that no other mammal could reach, its immense bulk casting shadows over the forests like a living monument. Its presence revealed the possibilities inherent in a post-dinosaur world, that mammals, freed from the dominance of reptiles, could explore size and scale on an unprecedented plane. In South America, terror birds stalked open grasslands, their hooked beaks and formidable legs perfect adaptations for predation, rivaling the hunting strategies of small theropods from a bygone age. These predators were not mere curiosities. They were the apex of evolutionary experimentation, manifestations of nature's relentless drive to explore form, function, and dominance. Meanwhile, the armored titans of the Americas Glyptodon and Dodecura stood, as testaments to the dialogue between offense and defense that had defined life since the earliest vertebrates. Their shells, impenetrable fortresses of fused bone, bore the scars of countless failed attacks. Across millions of years, predators evolved in response, developing strength, strategy, and cunning sufficient to challenge these living tanks. Fossilized remains suggest encounters between predator and prey, hints of battles that once shaped the course of evolution itself. Every claw mark, every bite, every layer of armor recorded a story of survival and adaptation, a silent chronicle of nature's unending theater. Even the water teemed with monsters, though often overlooked in favor of terrestrial spectacles. Rivers and lakes of the Cenozoic harbored giant crocodilians, enormous fish, and serpentine predators like Titanoboa, a colossal snake exceeding 12 meters in length, coiling silently through swampy waters. These aquatic giants were no mere reflections of their Mesozoic ancestors. They represented new solutions to survival in the warm, equable climates of the Paleocene and Eocene. Here, life tested its limits in 3 dimensions, experimenting with form, size, and predation in both air and water, above and below the canopy. And throughout all of these revelations, the Earth itself served as both stage and director. Climate oscillated, mountains rose, oceans shifted, and life responded with ingenuity, filling niches and crafting monsters attuned to their surroundings. Fossils were the remnants of this performance, fragments of scripts written in bone, shell, and leaf. Each discovery, whether a skull fragment or a complete skeleton, allowed modern eyes to reconstruct acts that had played out over tens of millions of years. These were not silent histories, they were lessons in persistence, adaptation, and the inexorable creativity of life. To behold the Cenozoic in full is to confront a world simultaneously familiar and alien, a continuum in which mammals and birds ascended into forms that rivaled the imagination of any myth. It is a story of ambition and fragility, of titans walking the earth in a grand experiment that spans epochs. Life, in this age, was both bold and precarious, testing limits and embracing possibilities with the patient, unyielding rhythm of evolution. The monsters of the Cenozoic were proof that even in the shadow of extinction, the Earth's theater remained vibrant, that life's capacity for innovation was boundless, and that every age of giants, no matter how lost to memory, had shaped the trajectory of the world we inhabit today. Time has a peculiar way of shaping memory, while the thunder of dinosaurs echoes through the collective imagination. The Cenozoic's giants, though no less astonishing, seem to have slipped into shadow. Perhaps it is because mammals, birds, and other familiar lineages dominate the modern world. They appear as kin rather than as wholly alien invaders from another age. Dinosaurs, in contrast, are utterly strange, enormous, scaled, and cloaked in the exoticism of deep time. They are symbols, icons, and warnings of an Earth far removed from human experience. The Cenozoic monsters, despite their size and power, carry a subtle familiarity. They walk in forms we recognize, yet their true magnificence is muted in our imagination, quietly eclipsed by the grandeur of their Mesozoic predecessors. And yet, our ancestors knew them. Humans once coexisted with mammoths the size of small buses, saber-tooths capable of severing a limb with a single bite, and ground sloths towering over the tallest man. The archaeological record shows that these creatures were hunted, revered, and feared, their presence intertwined with the dawn of human culture. Still, the stories faded, oral traditions fragmented, myths absorbed into allegory, until the memory of these titans remained only in bone buried deep beneath the soil. It is a paradox of memory. That which once loomed large in daily life can vanish more completely than what we never saw, leaving the dinosaurs, creatures from a more distant, imagined past, to dominate our fascination. Science has since provided glimpses of these forgotten worlds, but questions linger. Why did some species vanish while others endured? Radiocarbon dating, stratigraphy, and climate reconstructions suggest a convergence of forces. As the ice ages advanced, ecosystems shifted and habitats fragmented. Yet the timing of human expansion across continents cannot be ignored. The arrival of humans in the Americas, Australia, and other regions coincides with the Pleistocene megafaunal collapse. Mammoths, mastodons, giant sloths, and other titans disappeared within a few millennia of human colonization. Debate persists. Was it climate, hunting, or an intricate combination of both? The answer may lie not in absolutes, but in the interplay between nature and its newest, most capable predator. Philosophically, the mystery runs deeper than extinction alone. It touches upon the selective nature of memory, imagination, and awe. Humanity marvels at creatures that are utterly alien to its experience, while creatures that feel somehow familiar are more icily forgotten. There is a psychological lens at work. To imagine a giant bird stalking the plains or a wolf-headed titan prowling coastlines challenges our sense of normalcy. Yet its familiarity mammalian form, feathered or furred body can dull that wonder. The Cenozoic's monsters are both extraordinary and intimate, occupying a liminal space that escapes the stark narrative of terror and fascination that dinosaurs command. Thus, the mystery deepens not merely in science, but in perception. These creatures existed, thrived, and vanished. They were giants, predators, architects of ecosystems, and yet their stories were muted, their echoes quieter, their presence relegated to the pages of scholarly journals rather than the dreams of children. To confront them is to confront our own biases of imagination, the ways we choose what to remember and what to let slip into the shadows of forgotten time. In the bones, in the fossilized forests and frozen rivers, the Cenozoic monsters wait patiently for rediscovery, reminding us that memory is as selective as extinction, and that wonder often requires both eyes and imagination wide open. The silence that surrounds the Cenozoic monsters is not merely a consequence of time, but also of narrative. Dinosaurs arrived in textbooks and films as symbols of a world irretrievably lost, of a past so alien it could only inspire awe. The Cenozoic creatures, despite their titanic scale, were close enough to our own forms to be unintentionally diminished in the imagination. A ground sloth might be massive, Yet it walks on familiar legs, has familiar claws, and exhibits behaviors we can recognize. A saber-tooth may strike fear, yet its feline lineage connects it to creatures still prowling the wilds today. There is a subtle dissonance here. Familiarity breeds invisibility. These monsters, though once rulers of Earth's stages, have been partially erased from our collective consciousness because they feel like extensions of the present rather than echoes from a world utterly alien. The archaeological and paleontological records reveal a more tangible presence of these forgotten giants. Humans and Pleistocene megafauna intersected across continents, their lives entwined in landscapes now lost to memory. Cave paintings, rudimentary tools, and butchery marks on bones testify to encounters that shaped human survival and culture. Yet even direct contact did not guarantee remembrance. Oral histories are fragile. Environmental upheaval, societal shifts, and cultural evolution gradually dissolve the threads that link memory to reality. Within a few generations, the giant sloths, mammoths, and terror birds that once walked alongside humans faded into myth, their existence reduced to fragmentary tales or symbolic references. In this sense, extinction was only half the story. Oblivion was the other. Scientific investigation, arriving centuries later, provided a resurrection of sorts. Fossils, stratigraphy, and radiometric dating revealed the true scale of these creatures' lives and the epochs they dominated. Ice cores and sediment analysis reconstructed climates in which forests reached the poles and crocodiles swam in what is now frozen Arctic tundra. Yet even as science illuminated their existence, the Cenozoic monsters remained psychologically distant, overshadowed by the spectacle of dinosaurs. Their extinction often entwined with the spread of humans, climate fluctuations, and complex ecological interactions adds layers of mystery. Did these creatures vanish primarily due to environmental shifts, or were human hunters the final catalysts? Evidence suggests both forces intertwined, yet the precise balance remains elusive, leaving the narrative incomplete and haunting. The very act of forgetting, it seems, carries philosophical weight. Memory is selective. Imagination favors the extraordinary, the incomprehensible, the utterly alien. Dinosaurs, creatures so unlike anything alive today, naturally captured attention and imagination. Mammalian giants, by contrast, despite their size and terror, are subtly familiar. Our minds categorize them as variations of what we already know, muting the drama of their existence. Yet in the bones, the fossilized forests, and the Arctic relics, the Cenozoic's titans wait patiently, urging recognition, demanding reflection. To study them is to confront the interplay between perception and reality, between human imagination and the indifferent creativity of Earth. These monsters are not only lessons in evolution and extinction, they are reminders of the fragility of memory, the impermanence of both life and the stories we tell about it. Even today, the echoes of the Cenozoic continue to challenge assumptions about the world. By reimagining these creatures in their true scale and context, humanity begins to grasp the immense diversity, adaptability, and resilience of life. The Forgotten Age is revealed not merely as a prelude to human history, but as a testament to the persistent ingenuity of nature, a period where the Earth's stage was populated with forms as strange and imposing as any in human imagination. And as paleontologists uncover more fossils, refine radiometric timelines, and reconstruct climates with ever greater precision, the mystery deepens, not only in scientific complexity, but in the philosophical question of why we forget some monsters while we canonize others. The pursuit of the Cenozoic's forgotten monsters has entered an era where the boundary between discovery and imagination grows perilously thin. Modern technology allows scientists to peer into fossils in ways once considered impossible. High-resolution CT scans penetrate stone and bone, revealing internal structures of skulls, teeth, and vertebrae without shattering the delicate remains. Isotope analysis traces the diets of long-extinct creatures, the composition of their habitats, and even migratory patterns across continents. From permafrost in Siberia and Alaska, fragments of DNA, shards of life preserved in ice for tens of thousands of years, offer tantalizing glimpses of genetic lineages that bridge the ancient and the modern. Each new tool extends the reach of human inquiry, transforming inert fossils into living windows, allowing us to reconstruct the physiology, behavior, and ecosystems of creatures that vanished long before human memory could grasp them. In the genetic code of these remnants, connections emerge, linking the giants of the past to species that walk the earth today. The mammoth's lineage traces into the modern elephant, revealing traits preserved and lost, adaptations etched into DNA over millennia. Saber-toothed cats, though extinct, share molecular threads with lions and tigers, their genetic echoes whispering of hunting strategies and reproductive cycles. These links collapse temporal distance, creating a sense that the monsters of the Cenozoic are not entirely gone, but persist in subtle, living ways. Through molecular analysis, scientists trace evolution as a continuous narrative, a story of life negotiating form, function, and survival across tens of millions of years. Simulation models of ancient ecosystems push the imagination further still. Supercomputers now recreate Cenozoic landscapes with astonishing fidelity, integrating fossil evidence, climate reconstructions, and predator-prey dynamics. Planes teem virtually with giant sloths, terror birds, and massive ungulates. Rivers swell with crocodilians and boisterous fish. These simulations allow a dynamic understanding of ecology, how species interacted, competed, and coexisted. They reveal patterns of arms races, feeding hierarchies, and environmental pressures that bones alone could not convey. Science, in this way, becomes both archaeologist and playwright, reconstructing scenes that vanished from the world millions of years ago. Yet, the edge of science also raises ethical and philosophical questions. De-extinction, the attempt to revive species through genetic engineering, teeters between fascination and hubris. Could fragments of mammoth DNA, combined with living elephant genomes, one day give rise to a creature that walks again? And if so, where does studying the past end and rewriting it begin? There is a metaphorical necromancy in these efforts, summoning shadows from deep time, coaxing the ancient into a modern frame. It is a confrontation with mortality on a planetary scale, life restored not by natural process, but by human ingenuity. This pursuit illuminates a profound tension: the desire to witness and understand versus the temptation to intervene. The Cenozoic monsters, once vanished, now inhabit both memory and machine, bone and code. In their resurrection, whether virtual, genetic, or philosophical, they remind humanity of the fragility of extinction, the persistence of wonder, and the audacity of curiosity. Science here becomes more than observation. It is an act of imagination, a dialogue with time, a summons to hold the monstrous past in the light of the present, and to question what it truly means for something to be gone, beyond the laboratory. The extreme edge of science stretches into landscapes frozen by time itself. In the permafrost of Siberia and northern Canada, mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses lie entombed in ice, their flesh partially preserved, their bones interlaced with veins of frost. Within these icy vaults, fragments of DNA have survived tens of thousands of years, offering glimpses of gene sequences that once defined creatures of immense size and power. Each sample is a key to a world thought irretrievably lost. Researchers painstakingly extract these strands, piecing together genetic puzzles that hint at traits no fossil could fully reveal. The coloration of fur, the composition of fat layers that insulated against Ice Age cold, even disease susceptibility. It is a science of whispers, where every nucleotide carries the echoes of lives long vanished, yet insistently present in molecular form. At the same time, advanced imaging techniques illuminate the internal architecture of skeletal giants. CT scans and synchrotron imaging allow scientists to peer into bone microstructures, revealing growth patterns, disease markers, and even stress fractures that hint at predation, hunting strategies, or migratory pressures. Teeth, once simple markers of diet, now reveal isotopic signatures that map seasonal movements, preferred habitats, and trophic relationships. Such tools transform static remnants into dynamic narratives. The Earth becomes a theater, and every fossil is a performer whose gestures, however silent, speak volumes about the ecology of their age. By combining these datasets, researchers reconstruct not merely the anatomy of individual creatures, but the intricate interplay of predator and prey, forest and plain, river and delta. Virtual simulations take this reconstruction further, creating immersive, computationally generated worlds where Cenozoic monsters roam again. Supercomputers render landscapes from sediment cores, fossil distributions, and climate models, animating food webs that played out over millions of years. Terror birds chase early ungulates across plains, rendered in code. Indracothers stretch their massive necks toward the canopies of reconstructed forests. Giant sloths forage among ferns and flowering trees. These models allow scientists to explore ecological dynamics, testing hypotheses about predator-prey relationships, competition, and environmental stresses. In doing so, they reveal a startling reality. The Cenozoic was not a quiet interlude between dinosaurs and humans, but a period of ecological experimentation where life pushed the boundaries of size, form, and function in a relentless evolutionary dance. And then there is the frontier of extinction. Synthetic biology raises possibilities that were once purely speculative, bringing fragments of extinct genomes into living relatives, potentially producing creatures that echo lost giants. While practical challenges abound, ethical, ecological, and technical, the endeavor itself is a philosophical act, a confrontation with mortality on a planetary scale. When does studying the past become rewriting it? When does admiration become intervention? The very attempt to summon these creatures challenges humanity to consider its role as steward, observer, and agent of life. In the labs and icy vaults, science becomes a form of necromancy, coaxing shadows of the past into light, illuminating not only the creatures themselves, but our desire to touch the immensity of deep time. The Cenozoic monsters, once silent and forgotten, now inhabit multiple planes of existence in the fossil record, in reconstructed ecosystems, in digital simulations, and in fragments of living DNA. They challenge our perceptions of extinction and survival, of memory and imagination. They are proof that the Earth's story is not static, but a palimpsest, constantly rewritten by the passage of time and by the ingenuity of those who seek to understand it. To confront these creatures at the extreme edge of science is to confront both the limits of knowledge and the audacity of curiosity, a dialogue across millions of years that transforms bones into questions, fossils into narratives, and extinction into an invitation to wonder. The Cenozoic, a time often overlooked, emerges upon closer inspection as a period of extraordinary ecological creativity. a canvas upon which life repainted itself after the extinction of the dinosaurs. Mainstream science points first to the subtle but relentless force of climate. The early Paleocene and Eocene epochs were defined by greenhouse conditions, warm, humid, and equable climates that extended lush forests even to polar latitudes. These conditions created vast opportunities for life to experiment. Mammals, once small and nocturnal, found niches freed by the absence of giant reptiles. In the warmth of this new world, herbivores expanded into giant forms, browsing the canopies and plains with unprecedented size, while predators evolved in response, growing more powerful, more cunning, and more imposing with each evolutionary iteration. Later, as the earth cooled, ice sheets advanced and retreated, forests receded, and grasslands expanded. Life responded with agility and innovation, reshaping the forms of giants and testing survival strategies in a changing world. Climate, in this way, was both sculptor and stage, setting the conditions for titans to arise. Plate tectonics played an equally profound role. The slow drift of continents reshaped oceans, mountain ranges, and river systems, creating novel landscapes that prompted geographic isolation, speciation, and the emergence of new ecological opportunities. South America, long isolated, nurtured the terror birds, giant flightless predators that evolved to dominate without competition from placental carnivores. Asia, Africa, and North America each produced their own lineages of giants, sculpted by the unique interplay of geography and climate. As continents collided, deserts formed, forests fragmented, and corridors opened, allowing migrations that sparked evolutionary experimentation. The Earth was not static. It was a shifting theater, and life adapted with creativity that rivaled any imagined fantasy. Evolutionary pathways of mammals during the Cenozoic reflect both constraint and freedom. Released from the dominance of reptiles, mammals explored extreme body sizes and novel feeding strategies. Indracotherium, the largest land mammal ever, evolved to graze treetops, its elongated neck and massive legs opening ecological niches that had been unreachable for smaller creatures. Armored mammals like Glyptodons and giant sloths evolved protective strategies that allowed coexistence with predators such as Androcarchus or saber. Predator-prey dynamics drove some of the most dramatic adaptations, creating arms races where speed, size, and strength became the currency of survival. Life was experimenting at the boundaries of possibility, testing forms, behaviors, and strategies in response to each environmental QN, each competitive pressure. Empty ecological niches left by the extinct dinosaurs were quickly filled. From flightless birds to enormous carnivorous mammals, from towering herbivores to armored behemoths, nature abhors a vacuum. Each epoch witnessed the emergence of creatures as novel as they were formidable, illustrating a universal principle: life does not pause, does not stagnate, and does not forget. In the interplay of climate, geography, and evolutionary innovation, the Cenozoic emerges not as a simple aftermath, but as a complex, dynamic, and vibrant period where monsters were born again and again, each a testament to the persistence and ingenuity of life upon a changing Earth. The dynamics of climate and geography were only part of the story. They set the stage, but the true drama of the Cenozoic unfolded in the intricate dance between opportunity and constraint. Mammals, birds, and reptiles were suddenly actors in a theater of empty niches. Yet their evolutionary paths were neither random nor predetermined. The disappearance of the dinosaurs had cleared space for new forms, but survival still required mastery of resources, territory, and competition. Herbivores grew larger not merely because food was abundant, But because larger size conferred advantages, the ability to reach higher foliage, to store energy over lean seasons, and to deter predators with sheer mass. Predators, in turn, evolved not only to match these giants in strength, but to anticipate their behaviors, developing sophisticated hunting strategies, dental specialization, and even social cooperation. The Cenozoic world became an evolutionary arms race writ large, a laboratory in which life tested the extremes of possibility. And the results were nothing short of monstrous. Ecological theory helps explain why some lineages became titanic, while others remained modest. Resource distribution, habitat fragmentation, and interspecies competition created pressures that favored gigantism in certain contexts. In regions where predation was low, but competition for vegetation high, herbivores expanded in size to dominate their ecological tier. Where carnivorous mammals faced similarly massive prey, selection favored size, strength, and intelligence in parallel. The fossil record reveals these patterns repeatedly across continents. Isolated pockets produced giant ungulates, armored herbivores, and apex predators independently of one another. A striking example of convergent evolution. Each new discovery reinforces the idea that the Cenozoic was not a uniform age, but a mosaic of ecosystems in which environmental pressures sculpted life in profoundly diverse ways. Yet these patterns also highlight the vulnerability inherent in extreme specialization. Gigantic size demanded abundant food, stable climates, and uninterrupted habitats. When climate oscillations accelerated, ice ages reshaped landscapes, and humans entered previously untouched regions. These titans were unable to adapt quickly enough. Ecological theory suggests that life at the extreme edge is always precarious. Evolution can create marvels, but those marvels come with fragility. The very traits that allowed species to dominate for millions of years their size, their specialization, their slow reproductive cycles, so predisposed them to rapid collapse when conditions shifted. In this sense, the Cenozoic monsters were both triumphant and tragic, exemplifying nature's grandeur and its mercilessness. Viewed philosophically, mainstream explanations reveal a profound truth. The Cenozoic world reminds us that life is opportunistic, inventive, and relentless. Empty niches are never left unfilled. The voids created by extinction invite creation, and evolution answers with innovation on an epic scale. Through the lens of climate science, plate tectonics, and evolutionary biology, the rise and fall of these giants becomes not a tale of chance, but of natural laws expressed over geological time. Nature abhors emptiness, and so, repeatedly, it invents monsters, sculpting them from the clay of opportunity and necessity, leaving behind a record both awe-inspiring and humbling, a world in which survival is a canvas upon which the extraordinary is continually painted, then erased, and then painted again. The past holds shadows that science has yet to fully illuminate. Even after centuries of paleontological investigation, the possibility lingers that some Cenozoic giants remain hidden, buried beneath ice sheets, deep within uncharted jungles, or beneath layers of sediment yet to be uncovered. Antarctica's frozen expanses, once verdant forests, may still cradle fossilized remnants of mammals, birds, or reptiles far larger or stranger than anything catalogued. In South America's dense rainforests, where exploration is difficult and geological mapping incomplete, skeletal traces might lie undisturbed, waiting for the curious hands of future generations. The earth preserves secrets in silence, and the silence itself invites speculation. Fossils, despite their concreteness, are not immune to reinterpretation. Some specimens may have been misclassified, their true nature obscured by incomplete remains or by the biases of the scientists who first encountered them. A jawbone thought to belong to a known species could, in fact, represent a lineage that defies conventional classification, a creature as alien, in form as a dinosaur yet existing in the Cenozoic age. Paleontology, while rigorous, is a detective story played out over millions of years. Every fragment is a clue, and every reconstruction a tentative hypothesis. The gaps in the record are spaces for imagination, places where the monstrous possibilities of evolution whisper, inviting both caution and wonder. Even human culture reflects the residual echoes of these creatures. Myths of giants, dragons, and enormous beasts have emerged in every civilization, often dismissed as symbolic or allegorical. Yet some speculative thinkers propose that these stories may preserve faint, distorted memories of encounters with surviving Cenozoic monsters, or, at least, of human awareness of their remains. While such ideas cannot be confirmed, they offer a poetic lens through which to consider the intersection of memory, imagination, and the traces of life that have left an indelible imprint on human consciousness. Stories of titans, after all, may not be mere fantasy, but echoes refracted through time, transformed and amplified by myth. Speculative theories also contemplate evolutionary pathways that never came to fruition. The Earth's history is dotted with what-ifs, lineages that could have produced creatures of unimaginable size or form but were cut short by extinction events or environmental shifts. Hypercarnivorous mammals, gigantic arboreal predators, or armored giants with forms unlike anything alive today might have existed briefly, leaving little evidence, only tantalizing hints in fragmented fossils. Parallel Earths, imagined by evolutionary thought experiments, offer a vision of a Cenozoic that unfolded differently, where saber-tooths could have become apex forest hunters, or terror birds could have evolved into even larger, more cunning predators. These conjectures, while speculative, illuminate the vast range of possibilities inherent in evolution. The sheer creativity of life responding to opportunity and pressure. Ultimately, speculation serves a profound role. It fills the silence left by extinction, giving voice to creatures whose lives we can reconstruct only partially, whose existence we can infer but never fully witness. To imagine these lost giants is to participate in a dialogue across deep time, to breathe life into shadows and consider the extraordinary range of life that might have been. In this interplay between fact and imagination, science becomes both lens and canvas. The Cenozoic monsters are not only fossils to be measured and dated, but also echoes of wonder, invitations to reflect on the fragility, audacity, and inexhaustible inventiveness of life itself, beyond the realm of speculation. Contemporary science has taken up the mantle of rediscovery with unprecedented tools and methods. Teams of paleontologists, clad in dust-streaked field gear, traverse deserts, tundras, and remote forests in search of the bones and teeth that may unlock new chapters of the Cenozoic story. In Patagonia, the Gobi, and the Arctic, layers of sediment and ice guard their secrets jealously. But modern excavation techniques, ground-penetrating radar, drone mapping, and 3D imaging allow researchers to peer into the Earth with a precision unimaginable to the early fossil hunters. Each unearthed specimen, no matter how fragmentary, is a voice from the past, a testimony to forms of life that once dominated ecosystems and shaped the evolution of countless other species. The patience, skill, and intuition of these scientists transform fieldwork into a kind of archaeological poetry, where each bone is both artifact and narrative. Molecular biology and genetics have added an extraordinary dimension to the search for understanding. Ancient DNA, painstakingly extracted from permafrost or well-preserved cave sites, offers glimpses into evolutionary relationships previously impossible to trace. Sequencing reveals the hidden kinships between extinct giants and their modern descendants, illuminating traits once lost or altered over millennia. In doing so, genetics provides more than taxonomy. It reconstructs life histories, behaviors, and adaptations with startling clarity. Saber-toothed cats, mammoths, and giant ground sloths re-emerge in data, their lineages traced across continents and climates, revealing migration patterns, population dynamics, and ecological roles. Where bones speak of form, DNA speaks of life itself, providing the threads that link the deep past to the living present. Climate science now contributes to the narrative, reconstructing the worlds these monsters inhabited with astonishing detail. Ice cores, sediment layers, and isotopic analysis allow scientists to map temperature fluctuations, forest coverage, and river systems across millions of years. These reconstructions reveal that Cenozoic ecosystems were not static backdrops, but dynamic arenas, shifting under the pressures of greenhouse climates, cooling periods, and the gradual advance of ice sheets. By integrating this environmental data with fossil and genetic evidence, researchers can simulate the interactions of species, understand the pressures that drove gigantism, and model the vulnerabilities that led to extinction. The story of these monsters becomes not merely one of size and spectacle, but of ecological context, resilience, and fragility. Collaboration across disciplines, paleontology, genetics, climatology, and computer science has transformed the study of Cenozoic life into an intricate tapestry of insight. Supercomputers reconstruct ecosystems, digital animations bring behavior to life, and cross-continental databases allow scientists to compare species and habitats at a global scale. In this way, the forgotten monsters of the Cenozoic are emerging from the shadows, no longer silent or overlooked. The work is meticulous, patient, and reverent, yet imbued with wonder. Each discovery challenges assumptions, fills gaps in the fossil record, and sometimes overturns long-held interpretations. Ultimately, current scientific efforts are a dialogue with time itself. By uncovering fossils, sequencing ancient DNA, and simulating lost ecosystems, humanity does more than catalogue the past. It engages with it philosophically. The Cenozoic monsters, once forgotten, are now a mirror, reflecting both the creativity of life and the persistent curiosity of our own species. Science becomes an act of remembrance, a pursuit not just of knowledge, but of understanding, way to honor lives that shaped the earth, and to confront the silence that extinction leaves behind. In each fragment of bone, each genetic sequence, and each reconstructed habitat, the giants of the Cenozoic patiently await recognition, reminding us that the Earth's story is far richer, stranger, and more poetic than our imagination alone might have conceived. Across the remote expanses of South America, Asia, and Siberia, scientists continue to unearth the remnants of a world long forgotten. In Patagonia's windswept plains, the fractured bones of giant ground sloths and towering ungulates emerge from sediment layers, revealing proportions and adaptations that challenge modern imagination. In the frozen reaches of Siberia, permafrost yields woolly mammoths, cave lions, and woolly rhinoceroses, preserved with soft tissue, hair, and sometimes fragments of DNA that speak across tens of thousands of years. Each excavation is a dialogue with deep time. Careful brushes sweep away millennia of dust, revealing a story that nature has kept silent for eons. The discoveries are both exhilarating and humbling, evidence of creatures that once dominated landscapes that are now unrecognizable, their lives reconstructed from the quiet testimony of bone and earth. Advances in ancient DNA have transformed these fragments into living narratives, Genetic sequencing allows scientists to trace evolutionary lineages, revealing the hidden connections between extinct giants and their modern descendants. Mammoths are no longer merely skeletons. They are reconstructed in silico, their traits predicted, their population dynamics mapped. Cave lions, whose roar once echoed through Ice Age forests, are understood through DNA analysis, offering insights into behavior, predation, and adaptation. These genetic glimpses provide an intimacy with life long vanished, a sense of presence that bones alone cannot convey. In laboratories, frozen fragments become archives of survival strategies, shedding light on resilience, vulnerability, and the evolutionary pressures that shaped these monsters. The urgency of discovery has never been greater. Permafrost, once a secure vault, is melting at unprecedented rates, eroding the very evidence that allows these stories to be told. Fossils dissolve, DNA fragments degrade, and entire ecosystems vanish before they can be fully reconstructed. Interdisciplinary teams race against time, combining paleontology, climatology, and geology to extract and analyze every piece of data while it remains accessible. Each discovery is a fleeting window into the past, a fragment of a narrative slipping through humanity's grasp. The work is meticulous and reverent, each bone, tooth, and genetic sequence treated as a precious testament to life's creativity and fragility. Simultaneously, conservationists and ecologists explore ways to reintroduce proxies of extinct species into modern landscapes. By studying the ecological roles of mammoths, giant herbivores, and apex predators, scientists hope to restore balance to ecosystems altered by their absence. The process is speculative, yet grounded in rigorous research, a way to connect past and present, to let the ghosts of the Cenozoic influence the living world. These efforts, both practical and poetic, embody humanity's fascination with the giants we lost and the worlds they inhabited. In this race against time, there is profound tension. Humanity is reading the final pages of a book that has been written over millions of years. Yet the pages are fragile, burning away even as we turn them. Fossils, permafrost, and DNA fragments are all ephemeral, vulnerable to decay and environmental change. The Cenozoic monsters demand attention not only for their grandeur, but as reminders of impermanence. Each discovery is a revelation, but also a warning. The record of life is delicate, its stories incomplete, and our opportunity to witness them is fleeting. In this urgency lies beauty and melancholy alike, a cinematic confrontation with time, extinction, and the relentless pursuit of understanding. Humanity may never fully resurrect the giants of the Cenozoic, but in pursuing their secrets, we confront both the scale of life and the brevity of existence, finding awe, reflection, and humility in equal measure. The pursuit of the Cenozoic monsters ultimately brings humanity face to face with profound philosophical questions. These creatures, enormous and enigmatic, challenge our perception of time, memory, and the place of our species within the vast continuum of life. They existed in worlds that were both familiar and alien: forests, where towering sloths browsed the canopy, plains ruled by flightless terror birds, tundras roamed by mammoths and cave lions. For millions of years, they shaped ecosystems, influenced evolutionary paths, and disappeared, leaving traces in bone, tooth, and fragmentary DNA. Their absence is not merely biological, it is cultural, a silence in the narrative of life that humans are only beginning to interpret. Confronting them forces us to reckon with the transient nature of dominance, the fragility of survival, and the arbitrariness of what endures in collective memory. Extinction itself becomes a mirror for human reflection. The Cenozoic monsters vanished due to a combination of climatic shifts, environmental change, and eventually human impact. Their disappearance is a cautionary tale written in the language of bones and genes, illustrating the delicate balance between life and the forces that shape it. Yet it is not a tale of despair alone. In the meticulous work of paleontologists, geneticists, and ecologists, we see a form of redemption. Knowledge resurrects memory, and curiosity restores presence, even when life itself has been lost. To study these giants is to engage in a dialogue across millions of years, to feel the weight of time and the depth of absence, and to appreciate that life's narrative is neither linear nor simple, but layered, fragile, and endlessly intricate. There is also a poetic resonance in the contrast between what we know and what remains unknown. Fossils speak, but their language is incomplete. DNA hints at existence, yet cannot convey the totality of life lived. In this interplay of knowledge and mystery, imagination becomes a necessary companion to science. Speculation allows us to envision the creatures that might have existed, the behaviors they may have exhibited, and the ecosystems they dominated. It is a way to fill the silence of extinction, not with fantasy, but with scientifically grounded reverie. In this, the Cenozoic monsters serve as catalysts for reflection, bridging the empirical and the philosophical, the tangible and the ineffable. Humanity's fascination with these giants is also a reflection of self-awareness. We are creatures profoundly aware of our own impermanence, capable of contemplating extinction on a scale beyond individual lifespans. The Cenozoic monsters embody the tension between existence and disappearance, power and vulnerability, presence and absence. By studying them, we confront our own place in the story of life, recognizing both the extraordinary creativity of evolution and the precariousness inherent in all forms of being. In their rise and fall, we see the echoes of our own species, journey a reminder that survival is contingent, that memory is selective, and that awe is eternal. Ultimately, the untold age of the Cenozoic monsters is more than a scientific inquiry. It is an exploration of meaning. It asks us to consider how life persists, adapts, and is remembered. It challenges us to reconcile wonder with loss, curiosity with humility, and knowledge with imagination. These giants, though long vanished, leave an enduring imprint on ecosystems, on the fossil record, and on the human spirit. They invite contemplation of a world both alien and familiar, and through them, humanity glimpses the vast, intricate, and fragile tapestry of life, an eternal reminder that the Earth's story is as much about absence as it is about presence, and that, in remembering the monsters we once shared our world with, we confront the profound depths of existence itself. In the quiet aftermath of the Cretaceous, when the last echoes of dinosaurs faded from Earth's forests and plains, a new world began to rise, world ruled not by reptiles, but by mammals, birds, and creatures of unimaginable scale. The giants of the Cenozoic remind us that life is a relentless force, endlessly resilient, capable of reinventing itself in the wake of catastrophic change. Their existence, for millions of years, was a testament to the power of opportunity, adaptation, and the experimentation inherent in evolution. They teach us that life does not wait for perfection, nor does it dwell on the past. It moves, it grows, it transforms, and yet it is never invincible. Each extinction, each vanished species, carries within it both tragedy and the possibility of rebirth elsewhere, in another lineage, in another epoch. The silence of forgotten eras weighs heavily upon the imagination. The Cenozoic, though richly documented through fossils, isotopic analyses, and genetic fragments, remains mostly inaccessible, a chapter of life's history largely unread. Most of Earth's history will never be known. Countless species left no trace, and entire ecosystems dissolved without leaving more than whispers in stone. This silence is humbling, a reminder that human understanding is partial, that memory itself is selective. We celebrate the dinosaurs, immortalized in museums, literature, and cinema. Yet the monsters that came after the terror birds, the colossal herbivores, the apex mammalian predators slipped quietly from awareness. Their absence is a mirror to our own consciousness, revealing how culture, imagination, and attention shaped the story of life, elevating some creatures to legend while consigning others to oblivion. Extinction carries a dual lesson. It is both a warning and a revelation. The Cenozoic giants were magnificent, yet vulnerable. They flourished in specific climates and niches, and when those conditions shifted through ice ages, habitat change, or human encroachment, they vanished. Their disappearance is not merely a record of loss. It is evidence of life's fragility, its dependence on circumstance, and the fleeting nature of dominance. It prompts reflection on the creatures that will follow in our wake. What legacy will humanity leave behind for future intelligences to discover? Will our cities, plastics, and technological monuments be the fossils they unearth, the remnants of a species that, like the Cenozoic monsters, rose to prominence only to face impermanence? The Cenozoic monsters were not merely beasts. They were a bridge between the age of dinosaurs and the rise of humans, a testament to Earth's capacity for reinvention and grandeur. Forgotten though they may be, their stories endure in bone, in DNA, and in the imagination, inviting awe, contemplation, and humility. They remind us that life is never static, that extinction is neither final judgment nor erasure, but a passage, a silent echo through the corridors of time. In remembering them, we touch the deep pulse of existence itself, recognizing that the world is larger, stranger, and more poetic than memory alone can hold, and that the legacy of monsters is not only in what survives, but in what they teach us about resilience, wonder, and the fragile, fleeting majesty of life. To confront the Cenozoic monsters is also to confront ourselves. They existed in a world without humans, yet their fates intersected with our ancestors as Homo sapiens spread across continents. The arrival of humans coincided with the decline of many megafauna, from mammoths to giant sloths, suggesting that the choices and actions of a single species can ripple across ecosystems and time. This intersection forces reflection on responsibility, stewardship, and the ethical dimensions of our presence on Earth. The monsters teach that power is fleeting, that dominance is provisional, and that even the most formidable beings are subject to forces beyond their control: climate, competition, and ultimately, the inevitability of change. In their story, there is both awe and a subtle warning, reminding humanity that our own epoch too is fragile. Written in the same language of extinction and adaptation that has governed life for eons, there is also a meditation on the nature of memory and myth. Humanity remembers selectively, elevating some forms of life to cultural prominence while neglecting others. Dinosaurs have been immortalized in stories, films, and scientific lore, while the Cenozoic monsters, equally colossal, bizarre, and influential, slipped into obscurity. This selective memory reflects not only curiosity but also comfort. Creatures too familiar, mammalian in form, may not inspire the same wonder as their reptilian predecessors, yet their lives were no less extraordinary. In considering why some creatures endure in collective consciousness while others fade, we confront the psychology of memory, the biases of culture, and the delicate relationship between knowledge and imagination. To remember the forgotten giants is to expand our empathy across time, to honor lives that shaped the earth yet left few traces, and to acknowledge the vastness of history that stretches beyond human perception. Finally, the reflection turns toward the future. The legacy of the Cenozoic monsters compels a deeper contemplation of humanity's place in the continuum of life. If extinction is a universal law, then the question is not only what has disappeared, but what will survive and what will we leave behind. The cities, technologies, and genetic footprints of humans may one day be studied as fossils, prompting future intelligences to speculate on our own age of giants. There is a profound symmetry in this. Just as we unearth and interpret the Cenozoic world, so too will the future encounter the traces of our civilization, fragments of a species both inventive and ephemeral. The monsters of the past thus serve as guides, teaching patience, humility, and wonder, reminding us that life is at once resilient and fragile, monumental and fleeting, and that every existence leaves echoes beyond its immediate perception. In this final contemplation, the Cenozoic monsters emerge not as relics, but as eternal symbols of life's audacity and vulnerability. They are bridges across epochs, mirrors of impermanence, and catalysts for awe. To study them is to immerse oneself in the poetry of evolution, to feel the weight of millions of years, and to recognize that the story of life is both vast and intimate. Forgotten though they may be, these giants endure in the human imagination, whispering lessons of resilience, humility, and the inexhaustible wonder of a world that continues to create, destroy, and inspire. Their shadows stretch into the present, a silent reminder that life's majesty is never static, and that, in remembering the monsters of the humanity glimpses the infinite possibilities of existence itself. Even as the Cenozoic monsters vanished into history, their presence continues to resonate in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. They shaped landscapes, influenced vegetation, and carved ecological niches that persisted long after their disappearance. The towering ground sloths, with limbs strong enough to bend trees, altered forest structures, dispersing seeds across continents, and indirectly shaping the very forests we study today. The saber-tooths and giant hyenas of Eurasia and North America regulated herbivore populations, enforcing a balance that, when removed, triggered cascading effects through ecosystems. Each extinction, therefore, was not merely the loss of a species, but the erasure of ecological dynamics that had persisted for millions of years. The earth carries these absences silently, like a score of music whose instruments have been removed, leaving only the echoes of a melody that once reverberated across continents. Studying these creatures is more than observing size or strength. It is reconstructing the poetry of interdependent life, understanding how monsters shape the rules of existence for everything around them. Humanity's fascination with these giants is not arbitrary. The Cenozoic monsters challenge the imagination in a way that is intimate yet alien. Unlike dinosaurs, whose forms are entirely alien to our own bodies, these mammals, birds, and reptiles shared anatomical features with creatures familiar to us. Limbs, teeth, but in scales and behaviors that border on the impossible. Their proportions and predatory capabilities invite reflection not only on evolution but on human perspective itself. How do we perceive life when size and form exceed our ordinary experience? The giant herbivores, the apex predators, the monstrous flightless birds, these beings stretch the limits of what we consider plausible in the natural world. In imagining their movement through forests, across plains, and within complex ecosystems, we confront the vast potential inherent in life's experimentation. They force us to consider evolution not as a predictable ladder of progress, but as a sprawling, chaotic, and inventive process, capable of producing forms of existence that both fascinate and unsettle. Yet the philosophical dimension of these creatures goes beyond their anatomy or ecological role. Their disappearance, and our forgetfulness of them, raises profound questions about human memory, culture, and the stories we choose to tell. Dinosaurs occupy a singular place in the human imagination because their extinction predates humanity by millions of years. They are symbols of a deep, incomprehensible time. The Cenozoic monsters, however, coexisted, at least temporarily, with early humans, and yet they did not survive in memory or myth to the same extent. Why is it that some species become immortalized while others are quietly erased? Part of the answer lies in psychological familiarity. Mammals, being anatomically closer to humans, may have seemed less exotic or terrifying to early observers. Their stories were not as mythically other, and perhaps this proximity made them easier to assimilate, to domesticate in imagination, rather than to elevate to the status of legend. The very act of forgetting, therefore, becomes a mirror, reflecting the selective nature of human attention and the cultural forces that shape our understanding of the past. Memory is not neutral. It is an interpretive lens, and the Cenozoic monsters sit at its margins, urging us to reconsider what it means to remember and to honor the fullness of life's history. Extinction itself is both a scientific and philosophical lens through which humanity must view these giants. The disappearance of mammoths, giant ground sloths, and saber-toothed cats was not an isolated event, but part of a broader pattern. The cyclical rise and fall of species over geological time, driven by climate, competition, and environmental upheaval. In this, the Cenozoic monsters exemplify the fragile interplay between opportunity and vulnerability. They flourished when conditions permitted and perished when the balance shifted. Their extinction is not merely a historical fact, but a cautionary reflection on impermanence. It underscores that no dominance is eternal, no ecosystem immutable, and that life, in its relentless creativity, is also mercilessly selective. Every species, no matter how formidable, exists in a precarious equilibrium, and the giants of the Cenozoic are a reminder of the thin line between flourishing and disappearance. Moreover, extinction is entwined with human ethics and responsibility. While climatic shifts contributed to the loss of many Cenozoic megafauna, the arrival of humans accelerated the process in many regions. The first migrations of Homo sapiens into the Americas and Australia coincided with the rapid decline of large mammals, a pattern echoed in many parts of the world. Hunting pressures, habitat modification, and indirect ecological impacts altered the delicate dynamics these ecosystems had sustained for millions of years. In this light, studying the forgotten giants is an act of ethical reflection. It confronts humanity with the consequences of its expansion and the profound influence one species can exert on the web of life. The silence left by these monsters is not merely natural. It is, in part, anthropogenic. Understanding it requires humility, a recognition that human agency can shape life on planetary scales, and a contemplation of what it means to inhabit a world where extinction is both natural and accelerated by conscious choice. There is also a poetic dimension to the gaps left by these creatures. Fossil records are fragmentary, DNA sequences incomplete, and behaviors lost to time. What remains are traces, a tooth, a femur, a track preserved in sediment. Yet within these fragments lies an invitation to imagination, a call to inhabit the world as these animals did. What did the forests of the Miocene feel like beneath the steppes of Indracotherium? How did the plains of North America echo with the calls of giant terror birds? What was it like to observe an Androsarchus at the apex of its predatory range, its wolfish head surveying the open plains? These questions cannot be answered fully, yet the attempt to envision them bridges science and art, fact and speculation, allowing us to experience, in part, the grandeur and strangeness of a world long gone. The human fascination with resurrecting or reconstructing these giants through models, animations, or extinction sciences, itself a reflection of philosophical yearning. To attempt to bring them back, even symbolically, is to grapple with mortality, memory, and the desire to witness what no longer exists. Technology allows glimpses into these lost lives, digital reconstructions that simulate movement and behavior, genetic fragments that hint at coloration, size, and physiology, and ecosystem models that reveal the dynamics of predator and prey. Yet even in these reconstructions, there is acknowledgement of limits. We cannot fully recreate the Cenozoic, just as we cannot fully recover our own lost histories. What we can do is listen attentively to the echoes left behind, to read the signs in bones, genes, and sediments, and to allow them to inspire reflection on continuity, change, and the nature of life itself. Perhaps the most profound lesson of the Cenozoic monsters lies in temporality. They existed in a world that spanned millions of years, their lives and extinctions unfolding on scales that dwarf human perception. They were part of epochs measured not in decades or centuries, but in millennia, with evolutionary experiments stretching across climates, continents, and cataclysms. To study them is to expand the human sense of time, to understand that our own lifespan is but a brief flicker in the grand chronology of Earth. The giants remind us that life's narrative is layered, and that each species, no matter how ephemeral, contributes to the complexity and richness of the biosphere. They are both monuments and lessons, monuments because of their scale and influence, and lessons because of their vulnerability and impermanence. Finally, contemplating the Cenozoic monsters forces a reflection on human legacy. If we, like them, are subject to the forces of change and extinction, what traces will remain after we are gone? Will future beings, whether human successors or entirely new intelligences, encounter the monuments of our civilization and infer narratives of dominance, adaptation, and disappearance? In studying the forgotten giants, we engage in a meditation on presence and absence, on the continuity of life, and on the fragile beauty of existence. The Cenozoic monsters are bridges across time, linking an Earth without humans to the age that would follow, reminding us that memory, wonder, and curiosity are as vital to life as survival itself. In remembering these monsters, humanity partakes in a quiet act of redemption, honoring lives that shaped the Earth, contemplating impermanence, and finding meaning in the fragments left behind. They are neither wholly alien nor entirely familiar, and in this tension lies their power. They evoke awe, melancholy, curiosity, and philosophical reflection. They remind us that the Earth is vast, strange, and eternally inventive. That extinction is not mere erasure but a form of storytelling, leaving shadows and echoes for those who follow. And that life, in all its forms, is both fragile and extraordinary. The Cenozoic monsters endure not only in fossils and genes, but in the human imagination, guiding us to reflect on resilience, vulnerability, and the infinite possibilities that unfold when life experiments with size, form, and dominance.